The people who effortlessly reinvent themselves at any age know something that the rest of us are missing. It's not what you think, and it's definitely not what they teach in self-help books or career counseling. Stay with me, because this changes everything. Most people believe that reinvention requires dramatic life overhauls, perfect timing, or some special combination of courage and resources that they don't possess. They think successful reinvention is reserved for people who are younger, wealthier, more talented, or somehow fundamentally different from who they are. But what if I told you that the most profound transformations happen not through force or dramatic change, but through understanding a simple principle that makes reinvention feel natural and inevitable rather than impossible and overwhelming? What I'm about to share will challenge everything you've been told about personal transformation and reveal why age, circumstances, and past decisions are not the limitations you think they are. By the end of our time together, you'll understand why the people who successfully reinvent themselves approach transformation completely differently than what conventional wisdom suggests, and why this understanding makes reinvention accessible and exciting at any stage of life. There's something profound that happens when we truly understand reinvention, not the surface-level changes most people attempt, but the deeper truth that changes everything. What I'm about to share might feel uncomfortable at first, then liberating, and finally transformative. Because here's what most people miss: you don't need to become someone completely different to reinvent yourself. You need to become more of who you authentically are beneath the layers of conditioning, expectations, and limitations that have accumulated over time. The trap. Have you noticed how the desire to reinvent yourself often feels like standing at the edge of a vast canyon with no bridge in sight? There's something happening beneath the surface that most of us miss because we're focused on all the reasons why transformation seems impossible at our age, with our responsibilities given our circumstances. Picture Michael, a 47-year-old accountant who had spent 23 years climbing the corporate ladder in a field that had never truly excited him. Every morning, he put on the same type of suit, drove the same route to work, and performed tasks that felt increasingly meaningless. He watched younger colleagues advance with energy and enthusiasm he couldn't remember feeling, while he felt trapped by mortgage payments, family responsibilities, and the voice in his head that whispered, "It's too late to start over now." Michael represents millions of us caught in what I call the reinvention paradox. The longer we've lived with a particular identity, the more impossible it seems to change, even when that identity no longer serves us. We accumulate evidence over years and decades that we are a certain type of person, good at certain things, limited in specific ways, and this evidence feels like unchangeable truth rather than historical data that might no longer be relevant. But here's what's really happening beneath the surface. We've confused our life circumstances with our identity, our past choices with our future possibilities, and our learned limitations with our actual capacity. Most people approach reinvention like they're trying to demolish their entire life and rebuild from scratch, which feels overwhelming, risky, and often impossible given real-world constraints. Michael tried the conventional approaches to change. He took personality assessments to discover his true calling, read books about finding passion and purpose, even hired a career coach who helped him identify transferable skills and explore different industries. But every path forward seemed to require starting over at entry level, taking massive pay cuts, or making changes so dramatic they felt like abandoning his family's security and his own sense of stability. Sound familiar? Michael was trapped in the fundamental misunderstanding that reinvention means becoming someone completely different rather than becoming more authentically yourself. He was trying to fix or replace who he was instead of understanding that transformation happens through uncovering and expressing who he actually is beneath the layers of conditioning and compromise. What Michael didn't realize, what most of us miss, is that successful reinvention rarely involves dramatic external changes. Instead, it involves subtle internal shifts that naturally lead to external transformation over time. The people who reinvent themselves most successfully don't abandon their past experience. They recontextualize it in service of their authentic expression. Think of how a snake naturally sheds its skin. The snake doesn't become a different creature, it reveals more of its essential nature by releasing what no longer fits. The shedding happens gradually and naturally when the time is right, not through force or struggle. The snake emerges more vibrant and capable, but still fundamentally itself. Most people try to force reinvention like they're trying to squeeze into clothing that's completely wrong for their body type, personality, and lifestyle. They pursue changes that look good from the outside but feel awkward and unsustainable from the inside. They exhaust themselves trying to become someone they think they should be, rather than discovering who they actually are when fear and limitation no longer constrain their authentic expression. The real trap isn't your age, your responsibilities, or your past decisions. The trap is believing that you need to become someone different rather than understanding that reinvention means removing the obstacles that prevent your authentic self from emerging naturally. When you understand this distinction, transformation stops feeling like an impossible leap and starts feeling like a natural evolution. You might be thinking, but I have real limitations, financial obligations, family responsibilities, skills that are specific to my current field. How can internal shifts possibly address these practical realities? That's exactly the right question, because what I'm about to share isn't about ignoring practical constraints. It's about discovering how authentic transformation works with real-world limitations rather than requiring you to overcome them through force or dramatic risk-taking. The people who successfully reinvent themselves at any age understand something that changes everything about how transformation actually works. They know that the most sustainable and fulfilling changes emerge from the inside out, starting with small shifts in understanding and expression that gradually create space for larger transformation without requiring dramatic upheaval or unsustainable risk. Michael's story doesn't end with him trapped in accounting forever, but his transformation didn't happen through quitting his job to become an artist or entrepreneur. It happened through understanding that reinvention begins with reclaiming his authentic preferences, interests, and natural capacities, then finding ways to express these qualities within and eventually beyond his current circumstances. The story. Let me tell you about Sarah, a 54-year-old high school teacher who had spent her entire adult life believing she was just a teacher with no other significant talents or possibilities. She had taught English literature for 28 years, raised 3 children, and lived what looked like a perfectly respectable life. But privately, she felt like she had somehow missed her real life, as if she were an actor playing a role that had never quite fit. Sarah had always been drawn to storytelling, but had convinced herself that her interest in writing was just a hobby, something people like her didn't pursue seriously. She had notebooks full of story fragments, character sketches, and half-finished essays that she kept hidden in her closet like evidence of a secret life she wasn't allowed to live. When her youngest child left for college, Sarah felt a strange combination of freedom and terror. For the first time in decades, she had space in her life, but she had no idea how to fill it. The voice in her head reminded her daily that she was too old to start writing seriously, that the publishing world was impossibly competitive, and that people her age should focus on retirement planning rather than creative pursuits. But something interesting happened during a particularly difficult week at school. Sarah was teaching a unit on personal narrative, and as she helped her students discover their authentic voices, she realized she had been silencing her own for decades. She began writing again, not with the goal of becoming a published author, but simply to reconnect with the part of herself that loved language, storytelling, and creative expression. Initially, Sarah's writing felt rusty and self-conscious. She compared her work to authors she admired and felt discouraged by the gap between her skill level and her aspirations. But gradually, something shifted. Instead of trying to write like someone else, she began discovering her own authentic voice, a voice that had been shaped by decades of teaching, parenting, and life experience in ways that made her stories uniquely compelling. Sarah didn't quit teaching immediately. Instead, she began integrating her rediscovered passion into her existing life. She started a creative writing club at school, began freelance writing for local publications, and slowly built confidence in her abilities. Her teaching became more inspired as she connected with her own creativity, and her writing improved as she drew on her deep understanding of human nature developed through decades of working with young people. 2 years later, Sarah published her first essay in a national magazine. 3 years after that, she had a book contract for a collection of stories about teaching and midlife transformation. But the most profound change wasn't external success. It was the internal transformation from someone who felt like she was living the wrong life to someone who understood that her life experiences had perfectly prepared her for her authentic expression. Sarah's story reveals something crucial about how reinvention actually works. She didn't abandon her past or start over from scratch. She recontextualized her experience as a teacher and parent as preparation for her authentic work as a writer. Her age became an asset rather than a limitation, because it had given her depth, wisdom, and perspective that enhanced rather than hindered her creative expression. Sarah didn't quit teaching immediately. Instead, she began integrating her rediscovered passion into her existing life. She started a creative writing club at school, began freelance writing for local publications, and slowly built confidence in her abilities. Her teaching became more inspired as she connected with her own creativity, and her writing improved as she drew on her deep understanding of human nature, developed through decades of working with young people. 2 years later, Sarah published her first essay in a national magazine. 3 years after that, she had a book contract for a collection of stories about teaching and midlife transformation. But the most profound change wasn't external success. It was the internal transformation from someone who felt like she was living the wrong life to someone who understood that her life experiences had perfectly prepared her for her authentic expression. Sarah's story reveals something crucial about how reinvention actually works. She didn't abandon her past or start over from scratch. She recontextualized her experience as a teacher and parent as preparation for her authentic work as a writer. Her age became an asset rather than a limitation, because it had given her depth, wisdom, and perspective that enhanced rather than hindered her creative expression. The key insight from Sarah's transformation is that reinvention doesn't require becoming someone completely different. It requires removing the internal obstacles that prevent your authentic nature from expressing itself fully. Sarah had always been a storyteller. She had simply been expressing this gift through teaching rather than writing. When she reconnected with her authentic interests and found ways to express them more directly, transformation felt natural rather than forced. This story illustrates why age can actually be an advantage in reinvention rather than an obstacle. The life experience, emotional intelligence, and self-knowledge that come with maturity provide a foundation for authentic transformation that younger people often lack. Sarah's decades of life experience became the raw material for her creative work rather than evidence that she was too old to change. The truth. Here's what transforms everything about reinvention at any age. You already are who you're meant to become. Transformation isn't about acquiring new identity or capabilities. It's about removing the layers of conditioning, limitation, and fear that have been covering your authentic nature. Most people exhaust themselves trying to become someone different instead of understanding that reinvention means becoming more fully yourself. They pursue changes that look impressive from the outside but feel foreign and unsustainable from the inside. True transformation happens when you stop trying to fit into someone else's idea of success and start expressing your authentic gifts and interests in ways that feel natural and energizing. While conventional wisdom suggests that reinvention requires dramatic external changes, master practitioners understand that the most sustainable transformation begins with internal recognition of who you already are beneath your circumstances, past choices, and learned limitations. When you connect with your authentic nature and begin expressing it more fully, external changes often follow naturally without force or struggle. Think of how an oak tree grows. It doesn't try to become a pine tree or wish it were a rose bush. It simply expresses its essential oak nature more fully over time, growing stronger, wider, and more magnificently itself with each passing season. The tree that emerges after decades of growth is dramatically different from the seedling it once was, but it's more oak-like, not less. Your reinvention works the same way. The person you're meant to become isn't someone completely different from who you are now. It's who you are when you're no longer constrained by fear, limitation, and the need to fit into boxes that were never designed for your unique combination of gifts, interests, and authentic expression. This understanding changes everything about how you approach transformation. Instead of looking outside yourself for the right career path, relationship model, or lifestyle template, you begin looking inside for the authentic preferences, natural talents, and genuine interests that have been trying to emerge throughout your life. These authentic elements of yourself often show up as recurring themes, persistent interests, or activities that energize you even when they're challenging. They might be things you loved as a child, before you learned to be practical, activities you find yourself drawn to despite having no logical reason for the attraction, or aspects of your current life that feel most aligned and satisfying. The beautiful truth is that these authentic elements don't disappear with age. They often become clearer and more accessible because you have more self-knowledge and less need to please others or fit into external expectations. What felt like impossible dreams at 20 might feel like natural next steps at 40, 50, or 60 because you've developed the wisdom, confidence, and resources to pursue what genuinely matters to you. Here's the profound shift. Instead of asking, "What should I do with my life?" or "What career would be successful?" you begin asking, "What wants to emerge through me?" and "How can I express more of who I authentically am?" These questions lead to transformation that feels like coming home to yourself rather than trying to become someone foreign. This is why people who successfully reinvent themselves often report that their transformation felt inevitable in retrospect. They weren't forcing themselves to change, they were finally allowing themselves to express what had always been true about their authentic nature but had been suppressed by circumstances, expectations, or fear. The practical implication is that successful reinvention rarely requires dramatic external changes in the beginning. It starts with small shifts toward greater authenticity, expressing genuine preferences, pursuing interests that energize you, saying no to commitments that drain you, and yes to opportunities that feel aligned with your natural inclinations. As you make these small moves toward authenticity, larger possibilities often become apparent, not because you're forcing change, but because you're creating space for your authentic nature to emerge and show you directions that weren't visible when you were trying to force yourself into predetermined molds. Age becomes an advantage in this process because maturity brings clarity about what matters, confidence to pursue authentic interests despite others' opinions, and often the resources and freedom to make choices based on alignment rather than survival. The very experiences that seem like limitations, career history, family responsibilities, financial obligations, often become the foundation for authentic transformation that honors both your authentic nature and your real-world circumstances. The most successful reinventions honor rather than abandon the past. They recontextualize life experience as preparation for authentic expression rather than evidence of limitation. Your decades of experience become the depth and wisdom that make your authentic expression more compelling, not obstacles that prevent transformation. This is why forced reinvention attempts often fail, while natural transformation feels sustainable and fulfilling. When you're expressing more of who you authentically are rather than trying to become someone different, change feels energizing rather than exhausting, aligned rather than artificial, and sustainable rather than forced. The secret isn't finding the right new identity to adopt, it's removing the obstacles that prevent your authentic identity from expressing itself fully. When you understand this principle, reinvention becomes as natural as a plant growing toward light rather than as difficult as trying to force a river to flow uphill. The foundations. Now that you understand the principle, let's explore how to create the optimal conditions for natural reinvention that honors both your authentic nature and your real-world circumstances. The most successful reinventions honor rather than abandon the past. They recontextualize life experience as preparation for authentic expression rather than evidence of limitation. Your decades of experience become the depth and wisdom that make your authentic expression more compelling, not obstacles that prevent transformation. This is why forced reinvention attempts often fail, while natural transformation feels sustainable and fulfilling. When you're expressing more of who you authentically are rather than trying to become someone different, change feels energizing rather than exhausting, aligned rather than artificial, and sustainable rather than forced. The secret isn't finding the right new identity to adopt, it's removing the obstacles that prevent your authentic identity from expressing itself fully. When you understand this principle, reinvention becomes as natural as a plant growing toward light rather than as difficult as trying to force a river to flow uphill. The foundations. Now that you understand the principle, let's explore how to create the optimal conditions for natural reinvention that honors both your authentic nature and your real-world circumstances. Inner recognition. The foundation of authentic reinvention is developing intimate familiarity with your genuine preferences, natural talents, and authentic interests beneath the layers of conditioning and compromise that accumulate over time. Most people are so focused on external expectations and practical limitations that they've lost touch with their own authentic inclinations. This recognition process isn't about discovering completely new aspects of yourself. It's about acknowledging and valuing parts of yourself that have always been present but may have been dismissed as impractical, impossible, or unimportant. These authentic elements often show up as activities that energize you, topics that capture your natural curiosity, or ways of being that feel most aligned and satisfying. Start by paying attention to moments when you feel most alive, engaged, and authentically yourself. Notice what you're doing, who you're with, and what environment supports this natural expression. These experiences provide valuable information about the conditions and activities that align with your authentic nature rather than requiring you to perform or adapt to external expectations. Also notice the persistent interests, recurring themes, or activities that continue to attract you despite having no obvious practical value or career relevance. These persistent attractions often point toward authentic aspects of yourself that want greater expression in your life. Consider the activities you loved as a child before you learned to be practical and realistic. While you may not want to pursue these activities exactly as you did decades ago, they often contain seeds of authentic interest that can be expressed in age-appropriate ways that honor both your mature capabilities and your genuine inclinations. Reflect on the aspects of your current life that feel most satisfying and aligned. What is it about these experiences that resonates with your authentic nature? How might these qualities be expressed more fully or in different contexts that better match your current life stage and circumstances? This recognition process requires patience and curiosity rather than immediate action. You're gathering information about your authentic nature, not trying to make dramatic life changes based on preliminary insights. The goal is developing clarity about who you actually are beneath your circumstances so you can make choices that honor this authentic foundation. Authentic expression. Once you begin recognizing your authentic nature, the next foundation involves finding ways to express these qualities more fully within your current life circumstances. This is where most people make the mistake of thinking they need to make dramatic changes immediately rather than starting with small moves toward greater authenticity. The key is beginning to express your authentic interests and preferences in low-risk ways that don't require major life upheaval. This might mean pursuing authentic interests as hobbies, volunteering in areas that align with your values, or finding ways to bring more of your genuine personality into your current work and relationships. Look for opportunities within your existing life structure to express authentic aspects of yourself more fully. If you're naturally creative but work in an analytical field, how might you bring creative problem solving to your current role? If you're naturally nurturing but work in competitive environments, how might you mentor others or create supportive team dynamics? These small expressions of authenticity serve two important purposes. First, they help you develop confidence in your authentic gifts and confirm that expressing your genuine nature feels energizing and sustainable. Second, they often lead to unexpected opportunities and connections that weren't visible when you were operating from compromise rather than authenticity. As you become more comfortable expressing authentic aspects of yourself, you can gradually expand these expressions into larger areas of your life. This might mean taking on projects that better match your interests, shifting your role within existing responsibilities, or beginning to explore new possibilities that honor both your authentic nature and practical constraints. The progression feels natural rather than forced because you're building on genuine interests and demonstrated capabilities rather than trying to pursue something that feels foreign or artificially imposed. Each step toward greater authenticity creates foundation for the next level of expression. Remember that authentic expression doesn't require perfection or immediate mastery. You're developing relationship with aspects of yourself that may have been dormant for years. Be patient with the learning process and focus on the energizing feeling of alignment rather than comparing your beginning efforts to others' advanced capabilities. Patient development. The third foundation recognizes that sustainable reinvention happens on natural timescales rather than forced ones. This patience isn't about being passive or accepting limitation. It's about understanding that deep, lasting transformation develops gradually through consistent expression of authenticity rather than dramatic overnight changes. Most people abandon reinvention attempts because they expect faster results than authentic transformation can naturally provide. They try approaches for a few weeks or months, don't see dramatic external changes, and conclude that transformation isn't possible for them. But authentic reinvention often involves years of gradual development that feels natural and sustainable rather than forced and exhausting. This foundation involves developing trust in the process of natural unfolding rather than trying to control the timeline or force specific outcomes. Your authentic nature knows its own rhythm for development and expression. Your job is to consistently create space for this emergence while allowing the timing and specific direction to unfold organically. During this development phase, you might notice periods of rapid growth alternating with times that feel stagnant or unclear. Both phases are natural and necessary parts of authentic transformation. Growth periods provide exciting progress and new possibilities, while integration periods allow you to consolidate gains and prepare for the next level of development. Use this patient development time to build genuine capabilities in areas that align with your authentic interests. This might mean taking courses, developing skills, or gaining experience that supports your emerging authentic expression. The key is choosing development activities that feel energizing and aligned rather than forced or purely strategic. Also use this time to gradually address practical constraints that might limit your ability to express authenticity more fully. This could involve building financial reserves, developing new income streams, or creating more flexibility in your current circumstances. These practical preparations happen alongside authentic development rather than before it. The beautiful aspect of patient development is that it allows transformation to feel sustainable and realistic, rather than overwhelming and risky. You're not abandoning your current life to pursue uncertain dreams, you're gradually evolving toward greater authenticity in ways that honor both your genuine nature and real-world responsibilities. Natural integration. The fourth foundation involves allowing your emerging authentic expression to naturally integrate into all areas of your life, rather than compartmentalizing it as a separate hobby or side interest. This integration often happens gradually as your confidence grows and opportunities emerge, but it represents the completion of authentic reinvention. True transformation occurs when your authentic nature becomes the foundation for how you work, relate to others, make decisions, and navigate daily life. This doesn't necessarily mean changing careers or making dramatic external shifts. It means operating from your genuine nature rather than from compromise, fear, or external expectations. This integration often manifests as increased confidence, clearer decision-making, and greater satisfaction in daily life. You're not trying to be someone different, you're simply being more fully yourself in all circumstances. This authenticity naturally attracts people and opportunities that align with your genuine nature, while naturally filtering out situations that require you to compromise your authentic expression. As integration develops, you might find that your relationships improve because you're operating from genuine preferences and clear boundaries rather than trying to please others or avoid conflict. Your work becomes more satisfying because you're bringing your authentic capabilities and interests to whatever you do, even if the external role remains similar. The integration process also often reveals new possibilities that weren't visible when you were operating from compromise. Authentic expression creates energy and clarity that often leads to unexpected opportunities, collaborations, or directions that honor both your genuine nature and practical needs. Eventually, this integration reaches a point where your authentic nature becomes so naturally expressed that transformation feels complete even if external circumstances haven't changed dramatically. You're living as yourself rather than playing a role, pursuing genuine interests rather than should-based goals, and making choices from clarity rather than confusion. This level of integration often feels like coming home to yourself after years of living in a house that never quite fit. The relief and satisfaction of authentic expression becomes so apparent that returning to compromise-based living feels impossible rather than necessary. Living transformation. As these foundations become established, something beautiful happens. Reinvention stops feeling like a project you're working on and starts feeling like a natural way of being that continues to evolve and express itself throughout your life. Continuous evolution. Authentic reinvention isn't a one-time transformation that ends when you achieve certain external goals. It becomes a way of living that remains responsive to your evolving authentic nature and changing life circumstances. This ongoing evolution feels natural and energizing rather than exhausting because it's based on expressing more of who you are rather than trying to become someone different. As you become comfortable with authentic expression, you develop the confidence and skills to continue evolving throughout your life. Changes that once felt impossible become natural next steps because you've learned to trust your authentic nature and work skillfully with practical constraints. This continuous evolution often accelerates as you age because you have less need to please others, more clarity about what matters, and often greater resources and freedom to pursue authentic interests. The constraints that seemed overwhelming in earlier decades often become manageable challenges that can be addressed creatively rather than insurmountable obstacles. Your comfort with ongoing transformation also becomes a gift to others who are struggling with their own reinvention challenges. Your example demonstrates that authentic change is possible at any age, which gives others permission to pursue their own authentic expression rather than accepting limitation and compromise. Meaningful contribution. As your authentic nature becomes more fully expressed, many people discover that their natural gifts and interests want to contribute to something larger than personal satisfaction. This service emerges organically from authentic expression rather than from obligation or external pressure. Your unique combination of life experience, developed capabilities, and authentic interests often creates opportunities for contribution that weren't possible earlier in your life. The depth and wisdom that come with maturity enhance rather than limit your capacity to make meaningful impact in areas that align with your genuine nature. This contribution might manifest through your work, relationships, creative expression, or community involvement. The key is that it feels like natural expression of who you are rather than forced effort to be helpful or significant. When you're operating from authentic nature, your natural gifts tend to flow toward where they can be most beneficial. The beautiful paradox is that this meaningful contribution often provides more satisfaction than the external success you may have pursued earlier in life. Contributing from authentic nature feels sustainable and fulfilling because it draws on your genuine strengths rather than requiring you to perform or adapt to external expectations. Integrated wisdom. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of successful reinvention is the integrated wisdom that develops through the process of authentic transformation. This wisdom includes practical skills for navigating change, but more importantly, it includes deep understanding of how to live authentically within real-world constraints. This wisdom manifests as increased confidence in your ability to handle whatever life presents, not because you can control outcomes, but because you've learned to respond from authentic nature rather than from fear or external pressure. You develop trust in your capacity to adapt and evolve while remaining true to your essential self. The integrated wisdom also includes understanding of how to work skillfully with limitations rather than being defeated by them. You've learned that constraints often provide creative challenges that lead to innovations and approaches you wouldn't have discovered without them. This wisdom becomes particularly valuable during difficult periods because you've learned that authentic expression provides resilience and meaning even when external circumstances are challenging. You're no longer dependent on perfect conditions to live authentically because you've developed the skills to express your genuine nature within whatever circumstances arise. Natural mentorship. As you become comfortable with ongoing authentic transformation, you naturally become a resource for others who are struggling with their own reinvention challenges. This mentorship happens organically through your example and presence, rather than through formal teaching or coaching roles. People are drawn to individuals who are living authentically because it gives them hope and permission for their own transformation. Your comfort with being yourself, regardless of age or circumstances, demonstrates that authentic living is possible and provides practical evidence that reinvention isn't limited by conventional constraints. This natural mentorship often enhances your own transformation because helping others recognize their authentic nature reinforces your understanding of how authentic expression works. You become even clearer about your own genuine nature through supporting others in discovering theirs. The mentorship also connects you with communities of people who value authentic expression over conventional success, which provides ongoing support for continued evolution and meaningful contribution. These relationships often become sources of inspiration, collaboration, and mutual encouragement for ongoing transformation. Effortless authenticity. The ultimate goal of reinvention at any age is reaching a place where authentic expression feels as natural as breathing. You're no longer working to become someone different, you're simply being yourself in whatever circumstances arise. This effortless authenticity shows up as natural confidence, clear decision-making, and genuine satisfaction with daily life regardless of external circumstances. You've learned to navigate the world from your authentic nature rather than from compromise, fear, or external expectations. People at this level often report feeling younger and more energetic than they did when they were trying to fit into roles that didn't match their genuine nature. Authentic expression provides energy rather than depleting it because you're working with your natural inclinations rather than against them. The transformation feels complete not because you've achieved specific external goals, but because you've learned to live as yourself rather than as who you thought you should be. This authenticity becomes the foundation for continued growth, meaningful contribution, and genuine satisfaction throughout the rest of your life. Timeless relevance. Perhaps the most beautiful aspect of successful reinvention is the recognition that authentic nature is timeless. The essential qualities that make you who you are don't diminish with age. They often become clearer, more refined, and more powerfully expressed as you develop the wisdom and confidence to honor them fully. This understanding transforms the entire conversation about aging from one of decline and limitation to one of continued potential and authentic expression. Your age becomes an asset that provides depth, perspective, and resources for expressing your authentic nature more fully rather than evidence that transformation is no longer possible. The people who successfully reinvent themselves at any age discover that their most fulfilling and impactful years often come later in life when they're finally free to express their authentic nature without the constraints of early career building, intensive child rearing, or the need to prove themselves according to external standards. This is the deepest truth about reinvention at any age. You're not becoming someone different, you're becoming more fully yourself. The transformation that matters most isn't changing your circumstances to match some external ideal. It's learning to express your authentic nature so fully that your circumstances naturally evolve to support and reflect who you really are. When you understand this principle, reinvention becomes as natural as a flower blooming in its proper season. It's not forced or artificial, it's the inevitable result of removing the obstacles that prevent your authentic nature from expressing itself fully. And this natural expression can happen at any age, in any circumstances, when you learn to work with your genuine nature rather than against them.
Your age, your experience, your accumulated wisdom, these aren't limitations on reinvention. They're the very foundation that makes authentic transformation possible, sustainable, and more meaningful than any change you could have forced earlier in your life when you had less self-knowledge and more need to conform to external expectations. This is how reinvention actually works at any age, not through dramatic external changes that require you to abandon your past, but through gentle internal recognition that allows your authentic nature to emerge and express itself more fully within whatever circumstances you face. The person you become isn't someone new, it's who you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning and compromise. And discovering this person is possible at any age, in any circumstances, when you understand that transformation is about uncovering rather than changing, expressing rather than forcing, and becoming more yourself rather than becoming someone different.